If you want to help Myth Vision Podcast grow, you can join our Patreon. There are different tiers, as well as help out with PayPal. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment.
Derek Lambert asks.
Who?
This guy.
Oh.
Dr. Price, the idea of Adam being put into a deep sleep and God creating Eve from his rib, side, bosom, whatever you might want to call. Then God putting Abraham into a deep sleep, making a covenant with him. Is it fair to say Jesus was put into a deep sleep on the cross? The idea of death being a slumber. Does this have some ancient Near Eastern meaning or a Greco-Roman meaning? Do you see anything in the concept of Adam has a covenant made with him and his Eve, his bride? Jesus, of course, the last Adam and Pauline ideas, but him dying by crucifixion, being put into a deep sleep, let's just say, creating a bride from him, his or preparing a bride for him. Could this be similar to the Adam narrative of putting Adam into a deep sleep, paralleling, in a sense, Jesus being put into a deep sleep for God to create a bride for him out of his death or blood and whatnot? So, do you see any possible parallel there? And I said, does this have any ancient Near Eastern meaning or Greco-Roman meaning? Anyway.
Well, with the Jesus thing, I think there'd have to be more to it. But I think the way the sleep comes in is if the sponge that they put on the lance or whatever it was, there's some ambiguity in Greek, two almost identical words for hyssop, which is just like a brush of like a tumbleweed, or a word for lance that the Roman would have had. I opt for the latter. But anyway, that they gave him wine to drink. Well, in the passage from Psalms that John quotes, they also, in the parallel to it, it speaks of it as poison. For my food, they gave me poison. Of course, it's long been thought with the swoon theory that doped Jesus up and so that he didn't suffer so much and may have died quickly or didn't die and they thought he was dead and so on. But the thing I think there's something else going on in the Abraham thing and in one version of the Transfiguration where it says the disciples were asleep. Well, actually it could have to do with the Gethsemane thing too, where they're all asleep. But I believe one gospel says the disciples were that they were drowsy, at least on the mountaintop. This seems to reflect a belief that in the presence of the numinous, the divine, you're overcome and it sort of knocks you out and you become sleepy and so forth. With Adam, it's not that, but it's like God is using an anesthetic on him. If he's going to do surgery and take a piece of the guy out, I don't know how if they anesthetized people in those days. I think of this horrifying scene in Gone with the Wind, where this big church is being used as a field hospital, and this poor wretch has to have his leg amputated, and there's no more ether or whatever, and so you hear these blood-curdling screams as they're chopping it off with him conscious. I don't know what they did about that in the old days. But if they had some way of numbing pain, it could just be that, though I'm a little surprised such a detail would be mentioned when it's a story full of miracles and God can do whatever he wants.
Let's poke on that if you don't mind, because I think that's important. I mean, my question might be broad stroke. Let's get down to a magnifying glass on Paul or on Adam. Do you think, and you just give yes or no even, because I kind of want to follow it up with, are there any parallels or any other ancient Near Eastern stories similar to this? Because you always have something you usually find. Adam being put into a deep sleep and God taking a rib or something from his bosom or side to create Eve. Should we take that at face value? I mean, like, does this have any? Does this mean something other than what we see in English and the way that we're looking at it? That he went to sleep, God pretty much performs surgery and creates a woman out of it. Is that what it's actually kind of implying, or does it mean something different than what we've always understood it to mean? That God put him to sleep, took a bone out or whatever, made Eve out of that. Because I mean, I would think it says what it says, just like he made man from dust. It's like, okay. Well, are we going to try and read into that or anything? Is there something we're missing? Is that better to be understood at face value, what it says? And like
it could be understood as on face value, in which case, by the way, the Gnostics had an interesting take on this, that because he was asleep when the woman was created, he didn't really know. He couldn't have remembered what happened. And the archons told him that this story, whereas in fact Eve created Adam, but he was deceived. That may be what 1st or 2nd Timothy is saying when Adam was created first, not Eve, because there's a few things in the pastorals where it sounds like they're rebutting some kind of a Gnostic view. So that's interesting, and that would make the sleep angle have a real meaning. And I don't know what all in the Gnostic retellings, or several of them, even in the Nag Hammadi stories, documents, some of that stuff may be very, very old and may be remnants of unedited versions of the story, and because there's all sorts of connections, like Adam and Eve were believed to have been the same as Attis and Cybele and that mystery religion and so forth. Well, okay, so that would make a lot of sense of the sleep thing. But ancient rabbis thought, and not without reason, that what it was really saying was that Adam was split down the middle, and that originally he had been a hermaphrodite. And let's see.
He was both male and female,
yeah.
And that God duplicated, making 2 in 1.
Yeah, and because the thing rib could just mean, as you said a moment ago, side. And he is referred to up until that point as the Adam, the human being, with no gender implication. But after that, it's different. The man says of the woman, this at last is flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. She came from the Ish, the male, therefore I'll call her the Isha, from the male. It's almost like man and woman, same pun really, and then later on, still, when the serpent tells her, "Why don't you eat that fruit? Nothing will happen to you." She says to him, "Oh, we can't eat that. We were told not to." Was she told? I mean, if she was just a rib at the time, how would she know this? Well, you could very easily say, well, he told her. But they, I think Phyllis Tribble still argues this, that is what's supposed to be understood. It certainly is a very ancient view, because in Zoroastrianism, Ahriman, the evil god, killed Gaiomard, the primal man, who was like Humpty Dumpty. He was a sphere with limbs, and the sphere is the perfect version. He split him down the middle, trying to kill him, but what an idiot, because he made man and woman, and now there's going to be a whole darn human race. That's kind of the point in Genesis too. Now procreation is possible. There's going to be an endless amount of pesky humans. And Zeus did the same thing when he created like 3 different kinds of ovoid humans, each of them with different sexual orientations. There were male ones, female ones, and male ones. And so he split them all in 2 to get some action going on Earth. And now that explains the sex drive. that you want to get back. You're urgent to get back with your other half. If you're a lesbian, there's another female half. If you're a gay man, there's another guy. It's Adam and Steve, as they say. And so this would be so similar to these old myths of the creation of humanity that it's not unlikely that was the point. And this comes up in a Jesus story from the Questions of Mary, a Gnostic text, where the resurrection appearance of Jesus to Mary Magdalene, it says that he says, "Watch this," and from his side he takes a woman, and the two have sex right in front of her. And he holds up a handful of semen and says, "This is what we must do to inherit the kingdom of God." This is so shocking that M.R. James wouldn't translate those lines from the Latin of the text we have. It didn't even tell you what they meant, but later people blabbed it. But that's interesting because that does presuppose Jesus as the last Adam, and that he is returning us to the pre-fall innocence that the Encratites believed in, that baptism brings you back to be included again in the primal Adam, Jesus. That's why there's no male and female, no Greek or Jew, nor slave or free. You're all one in Jesus, whom he doesn't say there, but it does in Corinthians, that he's the last Adam corresponding to the first and recapitulating the whole darn process.
Gotta ask you. You said it in passing, and then we'll be done with this video because this is good. You made reference to other ancient Near Eastern origin stories, if you will, in passing, and I'm sure there's plenty more you haven't mentioned that have a male-female narrative for the beginning. Do those narratives, quick yes or no on these, because then I have a question that I want to delve in on Adam. Do those narratives, are they trying to explain in those other ancient Near Eastern origin stories, are they trying to explain all of how man came to be, how men and women exist? Or is it only exclusively narratives about that particular tribe or that particular people? With that in mind, maybe you don't have to answer yes or no there, because that is what I'm trying to imply with Adam. There are groups out there that suggest Adam is not the first man of mankind, universally speaking, but he is the first supposed mythological allegory of Israel, or he is some, and this is not just one, there are other scholars who also imply that Adam is Israel and stuff like that. They look at things like, why is Adam wearing breastplates with stones, or why there's stones, or not breastplates with stones, maybe there's stones in the garden narrative that are same stones that are used on the breastplate of the high priest they find later in the narrative, or...
They must be thinking of Ezekiel 28, where I placed you with a guardian cherub in this garden of God with the stones of fire.
What about the laws, like Judah, before Israel even gets laws, he's practicing levirate marriage laws. You have, unclean and clean animals. These things in the narrative take place prior to an actual law that says, hey, here's what you're supposed to do, and here's the laws from Mosaic. He makes on Mount Horeb, I believe that's correct. He makes a covenant with Israel when Israel exists. A lot of people suggest that Adam up to Abraham practically is kind of like this allegory mythology of Israel itself. But the way you just described it is like, here's the explanation for why there are men and women in the world that exist. And this is kind of a universal view of Adam, not Adam is Israel, and that this is only a narrative about a particular tribe. And so from there you see like genealogies from Adam. Why does it matter from Adam onward? Is Adam the first man according to the Bible? Is pretty much my question. I wanted you to hear my thinking, and for those who are watching to hear my thinking out loud, because there's a lot of different ideas out there about Adam and origins and all that. So is he the father of mankind according to the Bible and all humanity?
Yeah, there's sort of an element of truth in the other theory, in that the Bible, like Genesis, is not reckoning with there being other nations until you get to chapter 10 with the table of nations, and apparently the editor who put it cheek by jowl with the Tower of Babel, they trace them back to Noah, and before that Adam. So that would make him implicitly the father of all nations. And there's nothing in the Eden story suggesting that, like Clarence Darrow said, that somebody pulled off another creation in the next county over. It doesn't say that. But the element of truth is that all these stories probably reflect the primitive belief of different cultures that they are it. They are mankind. Like China is called the Middle Kingdom, the center of the earth. Many American Indian tribal names just mean the people. And it stems from when they didn't really know about other groups. And a clue that about this is that Edom, the name of this small country adjacent to Israel, their ancestor is Esau, according to the Bible, but it looks kind of like this presupposes that Israelites, who were really the same as Edomites and all these other little countries there, that Edom was Adam, because the consonants are the roots of these words and names. There were no vowel points. You could vocalize them any old way you wanted. And so it seems to me Adam and Edom are the same, and that the Israelites either borrowed the first man of the Edomites, who would have been named Edom originally, because they viewed themselves as the people. So the first Edomite created was the first man created, and it was like a local variant of the Jewish creation story. And this is interesting because Israel had at least one other first man, because there are different views among different factions in Israel. And you remember who that was, right? Enosh. His name simply means man. Adam doesn't, by the way. It's used that way by the time we read it in Genesis, but it actually means something like red earth, which fits with the story of the clay modeling and all that. But it's a complicated mess, but I don't think there is really any clear evidence that Adam was believed to just be the progenitor of Israelites. I know that attracts some creationists because they realize that if the human race supposedly started with one pair of humans, you'd never be able to get the genetic diversity we see today from such a narrow gene pool. So I don't buy it at all. It's a desperate an attempt. Like when you pronounce that theory, you should say, yeah, that's the ticket.